This is Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, and you're listening to the 25th Hour radio show.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.
Today on the show, we have Apollo 14 astronaut and sixth man to walk on the moon, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell, welcome to our show.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
First of all, Dr. Mitchell, do you mind giving us a brief history of how you became to be a part of the Apollo 14 mission?
Well, it extends several years, but it wasn't where I started out, that's for sure. What I graduated from college in 1952, and the Korean War was on, and the draft was on, and I was about to be drafted into the Army, but I didn't want that since I'd already been flying many years and had a private pilot's license. I wanted to fly if I was going to serve in the military. Unfortunately, for circumstances, I didn't know this at the time, but neither the Navy Air Corps nor the Air Force took married men, and I had just married my college sweetheart when we graduated from college. And the only way, therefore, I was going to get to fly was I enlisted in the Navy, became a seaman, went to officer school, became an officer. Then I went to flight school and became a Navy pilot, and eventually a test pilot. That was kind of the getting started. So I spent the most of the decade of the 50s in the Pacific aboard carriers and flying for the Navy, and was on my way back to test pilot duty in October 4th, 1957, when Sputnik went up. Then I realized that a new juncture in human history had just been reached, and that the discovery of what space was all about and flying in space was a new opportunity. And I thought I wanted to be a part of it. And most of the astronauts who were selected, the initial astronauts, were test pilots. They were about 4 years older than me, so most of them, and a couple more years of test pilot experience, and I had to catch up. So I did a couple of years of test pilot work, and then went back to MIT and got a doctor's degree in aeronautics and astronautics at the beginning of space flight, when we really didn't know what we were much about space at all. So I got to be one of the early pioneers that ended up at NASA then to explore what space was all about. And that set me up to go to the moon on Apollo 14.
Well, a pioneer you definitely are, sir. This is Randy, by the way. And let me ask you, Dr. Mitchell, with all the extensive training you had to go through to prepare for space, was there anything you weren't prepared for?
No, I don't really think so. I think we did. We and the people working with us did an excellent job of anticipating the issues that we had to deal with, and we prepared very properly for contingencies. Most of our training was, what if this happens, or what if that happens? And we were pretty well prepared just about whatever could happen to us.
Well, on a space flight like that, when you're in space and you know you're going through your mission, your campaign, how do you pass time when not performing scheduled duties on missions like that?
You're performing duties all the time. See, our mission to the moon was 3 days out, and ours particularly, 3 days out, 3 days there, 3 days back. And we had things to do, studies to do, spacecraft performance to follow. All of that time, there wasn't really any downtime for us. Now, there's a little bit of time during the journey that we weren't all that busy, but there wasn't a lot of that time at all.
I want to back up just for a second. Before liftoff, when you're sitting there, is there ever a feeling of anxiousness, maybe? Like like, oh my goodness, this wasn't such a good idea, or were you and your crew so well trained those thoughts never enter your mind?
Well, I won't say thoughts never entered our mind, but we felt we were prepared to handle anything that happened. Now, on our particular flight, we had a thunderstorm pass overhead, or a bad weather pass overhead for 40 minutes, so we delayed our mission for 40 minutes while the storm passed. Well, on our particular mission, as it so happened, the first thing I remember after that was Al Shepard saying, "Wake up, mates, we're ready to go." So I'd taken a little nap during that 40-minute passage of a storm. That's how nervous we were about it, okay?
Well, you're sitting there in the rocket, you're strapped in, you're getting ready to have liftoff, and it happens. You're traveling to the moon, into space, you're breaking, the Earth's orbit or whatever. How long does it take to get from Earth to the moon?
Well, our mission, we were 3 days going, 3 days there, 3 days coming back. Our mission was 9 days long. Our mission, Apollo 14, was the first science mission. The Apollo 11 and 12, we know what happened to 13. 13 didn't make it. We had to bring them back. There's a story behind that, too. We actually flew the Apollo 13 mission, took over, and we called it Apollo 14, but we went to what had been the Apollo 13 site. And the guys before us, their job was to prove that we could do it, that the spacecraft were up to it, we could get to where we wanted to be, we could land properly and get off and be safe. They proved that. Our job then was to land at a site of scientific interest and do the work laid out for us and bring back the data and come home. So we did exactly that. And it was indeed the mission Apollo 13 would have done, except Apollo 13, of course, as we all know, had an explosion in space. We had to bring them home. But we did bring them home, and safely. So that showed that under even the very bad conditions, we could be on top of it and we could solve the problems and come home.
Dr. Mitchell, what is it like? I mean, what do you feel, your thoughts when you're walking on the moon? I mean, looking at our home planet.
Well, you don't have much time to look at the home planet from when we were doing our job. Of course, we stole a minute there and here and there and took a look at it, but and for us, it was directly overhead. It was quite magnificent to see Earth in the sky, just like you would see the moon in the sky and high overhead on a bright night. But let me point out, our job, we had practiced everything that we were going to do on the moon many, many times. We had a checklist on one wrist and a watch on the other, and we were going right by the book of what we had to do. We knew exactly what we had to do with each, and we had it all timed from practicing on Earth. So it was really a matter of going through the routine for us.
Is there a lot of debris in space?
No, not a lot. But if we around in orbit around the Earth, there will be quite a bit of debris if we keep putting satellites up and not being very careful about the things that stay in orbit and junk stays in orbit. Yes, it could build up. It could build up to be very unsafe over a period of time if we're not very careful about it.
Now, I'm not an astronaut by no means, but I read somewhere where the moon had a lot of static electricity on it. Did that become an issue when you guys were walking around? Because there's a lot of dust on the moon.
I don't know where that idea came from. There's very little of anything of that type of activity because there's no atmosphere on the moon and at all, and so there's really nothing to create static electricity. That's kind of, I believe, a misplaced notion somewhere.
Well, they were talking, I don't remember what it was I read. They said that when the astronauts got out that they were getting dust on their boots and possibly tracking it back in.
Well, that's a different matter. Yes, we did that because the surface of the moon is about the consistency of talcum powder. But on the front side where we were, it's lava rock that had lava that had come out from the inside of the moon to the front side of the moon, and then been pummeled up into talcum powder consistency that did into years of meteor impact, an impact that broke it up into very fine grained material. Now that was kind of a surprise. If you look on the backside of the moon, which we're privileged to do, you see it's brown dirt. If you look mostly on the front side of the moon, you see it's much more black basalt material, and with the smell of sulfur, which is in the volcanic material that comes out from the inside. And we noticed that very markedly. And that was the difference between the front side and the back side of the moon, which we didn't really get a chance to look at until we went there and went around behind it.
Now, on your journey home, you experienced a profound sensation, a sense of universal connectedness. What was that feeling, and how has that changed your life?
Well, it's okay. We'll dwell on that a little bit. It was, of course, after all my work was on the surface was done, my responsibility as lunar module pilot and scientist and with PhD was to be really responsible for the lunar module and know it like the back of my hand, and the surface activities, and have those well under control. And once that was all done, we were coming home. I had a little chance to look out the window a little more and enjoy the scenery. Now, we were in a position coming home where we were oriented perpendicular to the plane of the ecliptic. That means the plane that contains the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, and rotating to keep thermal balance on the spacecraft. So what that caused to happen was every 2 minutes as we rotated, here was the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, and a 360-degree panorama of the heavens appeared in the spacecraft window. And that's pretty wild, be able to see that. And we have to remember that in space, without the interference of the atmosphere, the stars are about 10 times bright and 10 times more numerous that you can see than on the surface of the Earth on the highest peak without a telescope. So it's really utterly a magnificent sight to see the heavens in that way. And our major planets, rather the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, and the major portions of our solar system in that perspective while you're traveling. And so I was looking at that. My major work was done. I was a systems engineer on a well-functioning spacecraft coming home after having been on the surface. And so I was very taken with this sight and realized that because of the depth of this insight, that perhaps our story of ourselves as told by our scientific cosmology was still incomplete and perhaps flawed. And the story of ourselves and how we got here from our religious cosmologies were perhaps archaic and perhaps flawed. And that now we needed to really think very hard and study very hard to reconstruct a lot of the things that we thought we knew. But now with this new era of spaceflight, perhaps we didn't. And this was kind of, for me, an ecstatic experience. And it made me realize that from my studies at both Harvard and MIT, when I was getting my doctoral work done, that we knew that the material in our bodies and the matter in our universe and in our solar system is created in star systems. That's where it comes from. It's created from the energy of what's called a zero-point energy field, which is the underlying field of which all matter is made. And I realized that, and it was an exciting idea to see that and to start to ask these deep questions that we really hadn't been able to answer with our science to this point in time. And so when I came back, well, first of all, this experience was one of feeling that because we're all part of the later star systems, that we're really stardust. I mean, our physical body is really stardust. Comes from, that's where it comes from. And also I realized that back in deep history, in the 1600s, there was a philosopher, writer, theologian that named René Descartes, mathematician as well, who wrote a paper in the 1600s, accepted by the church, that body, mind, physicality, spirituality belonged to different realms of reality that did not interact. Now, that was in the 1600s. It served the noble purpose that it got the Spanish Inquisition of the period off the backs of the intellectuals, and they quit burning them at the stake for disagreeing with the church, as long as they stayed away from mind and subjects that were considered epistemology or philosophy and consciousness. So for 400 years since that time, science did not concern itself with such matters until the end of the 19th century, when Max Planck and Einstein and the greats of that period discovered quantum physics, and that helped change it around. And by the 1920s, we knew that Descartes was wrong, that body, mind, physicality, spirituality do interact. And this was not known at that time. And when I came back from the moon and had this experience of ecstasy, of seeing this magnificence, I went through the science literature, couldn't find anything describing all of this. Then I went into the religious literature and couldn't find what I was looking for. So I asked some anthropologists and archaeologists from a nearby university to help me. And they dug into the ancient literature and came up a few weeks later, said, "We think we have something that describes your experience in space." And I said, "What is that?" They said, "Well, in the ancient Sanskrit, it's called samadhi, salakapa samadhi. And what it means is that you see things with your eyes and as they physically are, but you experience them emotionally with ecstasy and joy and a sense of unity at seeing the universe in this way." And I said, "Well, it sounds very much like what I experienced." And so I kept digging about it, and of course we found in different cultures, in Greek or ancient Greek culture, it's called metanoia, means change of mind, change of heart. In the Zen culture, it's called satori, or enlightenment. And we found that virtually each of our ancient cultures had some description of this type of experience, where one was overwhelmed with the beauty of the universe and had this type of experience that not just me, but many of us had in space, looking back at Earth from that perspective and seeing the magnificence of the universe and our solar system and our planets in that type of setting. And so that is what I call now the big picture effect, or the overview effect of seeing things in a new, magnificent way.
How long did this feeling last that you had? The sensation,
Well, when I had a few minutes from work, because I was, a systems engineer, we were still flying a spacecraft, but I got a chance to gawk out the window a little bit and look at the stars and the planets pass by. It would come back again, and it lasted all the way home, 3 days every time I'd look out the window.
Oh, wow.
Now, Dr. Mitchell, in 1972, you founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Can you explain to our listeners what that is and what that consisted of?
Well, that came out of this experience in space, which I realized that since science had not really studied consciousness or mind in any deep way, thanks to the Cartesian duality of 400 years earlier, that it was appropriate to do that. And I got involved with studying parapsychology and studying mind over matter phenomena at Stanford Research Institute, which I partnered with, and has raised enough funds to do some real studies in remote viewing, and had the psychic Uri Geller come in and show us some things that he could do. And so out of all of that came my desire to establish a formal institute to study these events and to bring them into science in a new way. My institute that I established in 1973 was called the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Noetic, N-O-E-T-I-C, coming out of the Greek word nous, or mind, meaning intuitive mind. And it's been in existence for 40 years now, bringing to science the tools to study these type of phenomenon that had not previously been considered a proper subject for scientific study. And we've changed all of that in the last 40 years now.
As old as our university is, do you think the human race will ever fully understand the true nature of their place in it? Or?
Well, let's hope so. We've hopefully got a ways to go. However, we have to also realize that we're not treating our current planets, our Earth, with sustainable care, precision, and kindness. Every measure of human activity is on exponential growth, and our non-renewable resources are disappearing at an alarming rate. And so we're going to have to learn to live in a more sustainable way if we're going to keep this planet going for as long as possible. However, let's remember that all star systems burn out, and in due course, our solar system will burn out. And now that's a couple of billion years down the road, it seems. But nevertheless, it's our destiny that in due course we have to be, if we get to live sustainably, in due course we'll have to be off of this star, or this planet, and find another one somewhere to have a planet around. And that's in the deep, distant future, but that is where it's all got to go if we're going to have a sustainable civilization.
How do you feel about the current state of space exploration now?
Well, it's in a little lull. But we've got to get our economy rolling again. We've got to get the countries together. I have lectured on this subject in many universities in many places over the last 40 years. And we will, of course, go on to Mars in due course. But when we really start to go to Mars and with human beings, it'll be kind of silly to say I came from the United States or China or Israel or Germany or wherever. No, we came from Earth. And so we've got to get our act together and start to act in that regard in exploration as a civilization, a global civilization, and work for our common good because we're all on this planet together.
I've seen a lot of things about Mars, some of the pictures that have come back and some of the things that they've, the reconnaissance they've done.
Well, we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of the pictures, were questionable, like the face on Mars. I'm sure you've seen that a million times.
Oh yes, I know quite all of that. That's not really deep, important stuff. What we're doing now is.
Well, just as an astronaut and someone that has broke, the barrier of gravity, do you feel that there might have been life there on Mars at one time? Ancient civilization?
Well, I don't think there's enough evidence that life arose on Mars like it did here, because Mars being twice as far away from the sun as our planet is, the heat flux on Mars from our sun is 1/4 of what it is on Earth. And that's probably not enough for life like we understand life to have arisen. Now, there could have been some microbial activity, that is true, and very likely there was. But whether that really constituted significant living systems remains to be seen. We'll have to do more studies and investigation before we can answer that question.
Dr. Mitchell, what's your future goals? What do you plan on doing in your future here?
Well, I work precisely on these things continuously. My goal is always serving the greater good. I am scientifically inclined to use the tools of science to understand our consciousness better, which is what I started out with noetics, my noetic foundation to do. that's coming along well. We're in 60 countries right now, helping bring these ideas into the departments of many universities around the world. And hopefully that we will all continue to grow and prosper and find our way to understand the universe we're in a much better way. We're still just infants in understanding the universe at large.
Well, Dr. Mitchell, we're almost out of time. We thank you so much for being on our program. You're always welcome to come back. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you very much. I did. I'm always glad to tell my story to those who want to listen. Have a good day.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.